work for a think tank called the IRR, which was for 85 years the South African Institute of Race Relations. And increasingly, any organisation evolves over such a long history, and increasingly we're positioned as an economic policy think tank seeking to influence the policy decisions taken by people who make such decisions. And I'd say around 2007, when Thabo Mbeki got axed at Polokwane, more and more groups, many in business, a number of foreign governments, and increasingly the South African government, which was a new experience for us, started to ask us to come in to help them understand what was changing in South Africa and why. And very quickly the question they were asking us evolved into, where is South Africa going? Why is it going there? And what is there? When we get there, what's it going to be like? And the book, which is called The Time Traveller's Guide to Our Next 10 Years, is a popular effort at trying to condense the arguments we started to make to those different audiences. And the argument is really quite simple at its most basic level. Its point of departure, it somewhat contradicts my conversation over coffee with Jane this morning, but many things happen at the same time, is that we've seen a fair degree of socio-economic progress in South Africa in the last 20 years. The number of households in a formal house have doubled. The number of households with electricity is increasing at twice the rate of households increasing themselves. Murder rate is down 50%, and there are many other sound bites that you can pick. One we use fairly often is that in early 90s, I think there were about 40 white engineers graduating for every black engineer. By last year, there are more black engineers graduating for every white engineer. So we are moving somewhat in the correct sort of direction. That is, however, a dangerous thing to do, because when you increase socio-economic circumstances, you increase people's expectations. And the veteran ANC MP, Ben Turok, wrote to us on this point, and I quote him often, and said, what you found is entirely consistent with revolutionary theory, that people are inspired to struggle when their living standards improve. The trouble we face is that too few groups, too few individuals have the means to reach the expectations that have been created. We know that, for example, the labour force absorption rate in the country, the best measure of the health of the labour market, it measures what the proportion of people that could work have a job, is sitting at only 41% and has fallen, in fact, 5 percentage points over the past decade. We know that only 4 in 100 children will pass maths and matric with 50%. We therefore get to what we call, I think it might be the opening chapter of the book, the crisis of rising expectations. And we can start to measure the effects of the crisis. We see it in protest levels, which are certainly going up, depending on what source you use. There's some dispute on those sources. Strike action in South Africa in the past 5 years has been occurring at 4 to 5 times the rate of the average level of strike action over the first 15 years after 1994. The government's own opinion polls show its popularity falling through the floor, 30 percentage points down over a decade. Voter turnout figures show that the ANC's lost its majority, in the sense that there are now more people who don't vote than those who vote for the ANC. In fact, an interesting statistic is that if half the people that don't vote again, but don't vote for the ANC, I don't know if that will happen, the ANC would lose the 2019 election. And the question the book then tried to answer is, what will the government's response be to this new environment that it finds itself in? And we suggest, after simplifying things to a certain extent, it's got 2 broad choices. What does it do in terms of economic policy to create an economy that meets the expectations of poor people, these rapidly rising expectations? And what does it do to South Africa as a free and open society? Does it see that as an asset that it can use to get backing for reform to meet expectations? Or does it start to see our free and open nature as a threat and clamp down on such freedoms in an attempt either to force reform or rule with a degree of impunity? How those choices came together suggested 4 scenarios. We call them the wide and the narrow, the rocky and the toll roads, and we don't think there's a 5th scenario, to a less or greater extent we'd like to argue. In the book, South Africa's future will fall broadly within the confines of something that we have described.